If discipline used to work for you, if pushing harder used to get results, and now it just leaves you more tired, more frustrated, and more disconnected, this video is for you. Because what looks like a discipline problem is often something much deeper, and forcing yourself through it is usually what makes things worse. Not because you're weak, not because you've lost motivation, but because your nervous system has shifted into a different mode entirely, and discipline doesn't work there. The productivity collapse nobody warns you about. At some point, many people hit a wall they don't recognize at first. You're still capable, you still care, you still want to do the things you know matter, but the effort it takes to start feels disproportionate. Small tasks feel heavy, decisions feel draining. Your body resists before your mind even gets involved, so you respond the only way you know how. You tighten your routines, you add pressure, you tell yourself to be more disciplined, and instead of improving, everything collapses faster. This is the moment most people misinterpret. They assume, I've gotten lazy, I've lost my edge, I need more willpower. But what's actually happening has very little to do with motivation and everything to do with safety. Discipline is not a moral trait. Let's get one thing clear first. Discipline is not a personality trait. It's not a character flaw or a strength you either have or don't have. Discipline is a state-dependent behavior. It emerges naturally when the nervous system feels resourced, regulated, safe enough to expend energy. When that state disappears, discipline doesn't need fixing. The system does. What burnout really is and why it breaks productivity. Burnout is often described as mental exhaustion, but physiologically, burnout is a long-term stress adaptation. If this sounds familiar, stay with me. Because the reason discipline fails here matters more than the solution. When your nervous system spends too much time in pressure, urgency, performance mode, self-surveillance, it eventually stops mobilizing energy the way it used to. Not because it can't, but because it decides it shouldn't. This is not a conscious choice, it's a protective one. Your body begins conserving energy, reducing output, limiting engagement. From the inside, this feels like procrastination, avoidance, numbness, fatigue, loss of drive. From the outside, it looks like a productivity collapse, but it's actually a shutdown response. Why pushing harder makes it worse? This is where discipline backfires. Discipline relies on mobilization. It assumes the system can access energy on demand. But in burnout, your nervous system has already learned mobilizing costs too much. So when you apply pressure, deadlines, rigid routines, self-criticism, your body doesn't rise to meet it, it retreats. That retreat might look like scrolling instead of starting, freezing instead of acting, checking out instead of focusing. And the more you push, the stronger the resistance becomes. Because now the nervous system isn't just tired, it feels threatened. Burnout is not about capacity, it's about safety. This is the reframe that changes everything. Burnout does not mean you lack capacity, it means your system no longer trusts the conditions under which that capacity was demanded. At some point, effort became associated with depletion, pressure, self-abandonment, chronic stress. So the nervous system adapted by pulling the brakes, not to punish you, but to protect you. And discipline, when applied without safety, feels like another threat. Why your mind can want what your body refuses. One of the most frustrating parts of burnout is this split. Your mind knows what to do, your values are still intact, your goals still matter, but your body won't cooperate. That's because motivation is not generated in the mind, it's regulated in the nervous system. You cannot cognitively override a body that feels unsafe. Trying to do so creates internal conflict and drains even more energy. The myth of getting back to who you were. A lot of burnout advice centers around returning to a former version of yourself, the productive version, the disciplined version, the version who could push through anything. But here's the truth no one says out loud. That version of you was running on borrowed nervous system capacity, and your body remembers the cost. So it resists going back, not because you're incapable, but because it's wiser now. Healing isn't about returning to who you were. It's about building a system that doesn't require self-override to function. Why discipline works for some people and not others. You may notice that some people seem to thrive on discipline. That doesn't mean discipline is universally effective. It means their nervous system currently tolerates it. Different bodies, different histories, different stress loads. Discipline works when the system feels safe enough to mobilize. It fails when the system is already in survival mode. And trying to apply the same strategies across different nervous system states creates shame where understanding is needed. What actually restores productivity after burnout? Here's the counterintuitive part. Productivity does not return through force. It returns through regulation. When the nervous system begins to sense predictability, gentleness, choice, reduced pressure, energy slowly comes back online. Not all at once, not dramatically, but steadily. And with that energy, discipline reemerges without being demanded. The role of safety in motivation. Motivation is not something you summon, it's something your body allows. When safety increases, curiosity returns, initiative returns, follow-through becomes possible again, not because you tried harder, but because the system no longer needs to protect itself from you. The quiet shift that changes everything. This is the shift that matters. From asking, how do I make myself do this, to asking, what would make this feel safer to begin? That question alone changes how your nervous system responds. It removes the threat. It introduces cooperation. It creates space. And in that space, action becomes possible again. Discipline as an outcome, not a tool. In a regulated system, discipline is a byproduct. It emerges naturally when effort doesn't equal depletion. Rest isn't punished. Worth isn't tied to output. In a dysregulated system, discipline feels like coercion. That's why it fails. Not because you're undisciplined, but because your body is done being forced. If you're here right now, if discipline stopped working for you, if productivity feels fragile in its ability, if effort feels heavier than it used to, this isn't a flaw to correct, it's information. Your nervous system is asking for a different approach, one that builds safety first, one that respects capacity, one that understands burnout as an adaptation, not a failure. And when that shift happens, discipline doesn't need to be chased, it returns on its own. You are not broken, you are not failing at discipline, and you don't need to push harder to fix this. Your body adapted to protect you, and when you learn to work with that adaptation instead of against it, momentum begins to rebuild quietly and sustainably.
If you want to continue this conversation, the next video explores what actually brings energy back online without pressure or force. Take care of your nervous system. Everything else follows.